Last time, we fetched records by primary key using EntityManager. Simple and direct, right? But what if we want to load it lazily? Can we delay the database hit until really needed? Exactly, that's what we're diving into today. Lazy loading using primary key fetch with EntityManager. Stay with me till the end, it's going to be really interesting. Alright guys, see on my screen. In the last video, we used the find method of EntityManager to fetch records easily. Now in today's video, we'll first quickly repeat that normal fetching using find. But the real fun starts when we move into lazy fetching. And listen carefully. We're not touching our old code. We'll create a completely new repository and a new controller just for this demo. So let's get started. First step, create a new class and name it Demo EntityManager Repository. First, annotate this class with that repository annotation. Simple, it will tell Spring that this is a repository class and it should manage it automatically. Next step, inject the EntityManager into this class. You can inject it using @persistence context or @autowired. But remember, best practice is to use @persistence context here. Okay, now let's quickly create the find by employee ID method by using find method of EntityManager. In the last video, we already wrote this code, so I'm just fast forwarding a bit here. Okay, so we found the employee using the find method of the EntityManager, and simply returns the employee object from our find by employee ID method. Now, let's quickly add some logs. First, we'll log when this method gets called. And then, after we execute the find method of the EntityManager. Okay, let's head over to demo.jdbc template controller. And no new classes here. I'm going a bit lazy today. It's been a whole year and I'm still working on finishing this course. First, let's inject Demo EntityManager repository into our controller. Next, we'll create the getEmployeeById method. And it'll be accessible via this path, demo/findByEmployeeId/employeeId. Create our getEmployeeById method, which return response entity of employee DTO. We're going to use a path variable annotation to grab the employee ID from the URL. After that, we'll call the findByEmployeeId method that we just created in our repository. Then, let's add some logs. and then converts the entity to a DTO using entity DTO mapper. Now, here's a critical point. The first time we access a variable from the employee object during the mapping. This will be super useful when dealing with lazy loading. Let's return the response. Using response entity to wrap the response. Now that we've written the code, let's go ahead and start the application. Let's switch over to Postman and hit the new API. I'm going to test it with employee ID 58. Send the request. And we got the success response with the details for employee ID 58, which belongs to Mohit Kumar. Okay, let's now switch to IntelliJ and take a look at the console log. See here, the first log printed is when our repository method is called. That's expected. Now, let's look at the logs. It's interesting. Right after we call the find method of the EntityManager, you can see the SQL query printed in the logs. This means as soon as the find method is invoked, the EntityManager automatically fetches the data from the database. It's not lazy loading at this point, but it's important to note how quickly the data is retrieved as soon as we call find on the EntityManager. So here, the data is immediately fetched from the DB when the method is called, and the SQL query gets printed right after. But remember, this is not lazy loading yet. We'll explore that in the next steps to see how lazy loading changes the behavior. Alright guys, now comes the interesting part. Let's see how to fetch data lazily using the primary key. And trust me, it's super simple. So, we already created that findByEmployeeID method earlier to fetch data using the primary key, right? Now, all we're going to do is copy and paste that same method and make a small change to switch to lazy loading. Instead of using the find method, which eagerly fetches the data immediately, we're going to use the getReference method provided by EntityManager. The cool part? The signature is almost exactly the same as the find method, so it's easy to switch. Now, here's the game changer. Unlike the find method that gives you the actual entity object right away, the getReference method returns a proxy object. That means the data isn't fetched immediately. Instead, the proxy object will only go to the database and fetch the data when you actually try to access one of its properties, like getEmployeeName. That's when the SQL query is executed, and the data is populated. So what's the benefit of this? Simple, it saves us from loading unnecessary data. With lazy loading, we're only fetching data when it's actually needed. This is especially useful for large datasets or when you want to delay database calls until absolutely necessary. Replace the find method with the getReference method. It's done. The method signature is exactly the same, so we don't need to change much. Next, call our findByEmployeeID lazy method from the controller. See on the screen, the first time we access the employee data when converting it into employee DTO. This is when the actual SQL query is executed by the EntityManager. Before this, no query was triggered because of lazy loading. Lazy loading means the data is fetched only when it's accessed, and that's exactly what happened here. The query didn't run when we retrieved the employee object, but as soon as we accessed a field, like getEmployeeName, that's when the query was triggered. It's like a delayed fetch. The data is only fetched when it's needed. One important thing to note: the find method of EntityManager returns a null object if no data is found. But when using the getReference method, which works with a proxy, if the data is not found, it doesn't just return null. Instead, it throws an EntityNotFound exception the first time we access the data. This is a key difference and something to keep in mind when using lazy loading. Start the application. Okay, now let's switch to Postman. And hit the API again. See, we got a successful response. Okay guys, switch to IntelliJ, focus on the console logs. See, as soon as our findByEmployeeID lazy method is called, we printed a log. Here it is. Next, notice we even got the findByEmployeeID lazy completed log, but no SQL query yet. Now move further. The log we added just before DTO conversion also printed. And right after that, boom, SQL query got printed in console. Why? Because that's the first time we actually accessed the entity fields, and that's when lazy loading kicked in and EntityManager hit the database. Guys, notice carefully, our findByEmployeeID lazy method finished, but no SQL query fired yet. EntityManager is chilling. It's super smart. Only when we touched the entity for the first time, like during DTO conversion, it said, "Okay, now you need the data," and then fired the SQL query. That's the magic of lazy loading. Okay guys, now I'm going to hit an employee ID that is not present in the database. Let's check what response we get. See, we got an error response. Actually, we haven't handled this exception properly yet. You can handle it easily using an @controller advice. We have already learned how to do this in earlier videos, so I'm not covering it again here. See our console? As soon as the employee ID wasn't found, getReference immediately threw an EntityNotFound exception, exactly like we discussed earlier. And this is the main thing I wanted to show you here: how lazy fetching behaves differently when the record doesn't exist. Simple, right? Alright, quick summary. Today, we learned how to fetch data using the primary key, both eagerly and lazily with EntityManager. In the next video, we'll see how to fetch records using other fields, not just the primary key. So stay tuned. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and like and comment if you're learning something new. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.